Welcome to my channel, Vibes of Life. In today's story, we dive deep into an unsettling truth that many people overlook. Something so ordinary, yet so powerful, it could shape the course of your future. The title says it all. Never leave your shoes in this place, or you will attract poverty for years. Sounds strange, right? But what if I told you this warning isn't just superstition, it's rooted in stories passed down for generations, patterns too consistent to ignore, and energy shifts that affect real people in real ways. Let me take you to a quiet town just outside the city, a place that looks peaceful on the outside but carries a strange energy, especially in one particular house. This is where our story begins. A young woman named Mira had just moved into this old, rented home after finally saving enough to live independently. She was full of hope, ambition, and plans for a better future. The house wasn't perfect, but it had charm. What it didn't have, however, was warmth. The moment she walked in, something felt off, like the walls were watching, like the air whispered things you couldn't quite hear. The previous tenant had left in a rush. No forwarding address, no explanation. Just a single note taped to the mirror. Never leave your shoes by the main door. Mira laughed at first. Who writes something like that? She thought it was a prank, just a quirky superstition, right? But after a week, she noticed things weren't going the way they should. Her freelance gigs started drying up. Unexpected bills showed up. Her plants began to wither despite watering them regularly. And most of all, she started waking up tired, like something was draining her overnight. She remembered the note. Still skeptical, but a little uneasy, she began to ask around. That's when she met an elderly neighbor, Mrs. D'Souza, who had lived on that street for over 50 years. With a serious look, she leaned in and said, "You didn't leave your shoes by the door, did you?" Mira hesitated. "Yes, just like everyone does." The old woman nodded slowly. That's where it starts. Poverty, misfortune, energy blockages, they creep in through the threshold. Shoes carry more than dust. They carry history, energy, sometimes pain. And when you leave them by the door, you're inviting all that into your home. The strange thing was, Mira wasn't the first person this happened to. Nor would she be the last. The neighborhood had stories, unexplainable losses, sudden bankruptcies, broken families, and they all had one detail in common: shoes left at the entrance. It sounds like an old myth, something our grandmothers might say, but the signs kept pointing in the same direction. And soon Mira would discover something buried beneath the floorboards near that doorway, something that would change everything she believed. But before we get there, you need to understand the hidden meaning behind where you place your shoes and why some spots in your home hold the power to attract abundance or trap you in cycles of scarcity for years. Because what happened next wasn't just strange, it was terrifying. And it's only just beginning. Mira couldn't sleep that night. Every little creak in the floor made her flinch. Her thoughts kept circling back to the old woman's words. Shoes carry more than dust. What did that even mean? It sounded absurd, and yet she couldn't deny the growing heaviness in her chest. Her room felt colder. Her dreams had turned strange, fragments of unfamiliar voices, shadowy hallways, and doors that refused to open. She hadn't had nightmares in years, but now every night felt like a silent warning. The next morning, she decided to explore the house more thoroughly. She checked under rugs, behind furniture, even opened a few floorboards that looked loose. It wasn't until she got to the entryway, the exact place where she usually left her shoes, that she noticed a subtle discoloration on the wooden floor, like something had once been burned or soaked deep into it. She ran her fingers over it. Cold. Too cold, almost like the energy of the spot was frozen in time. That same day, Mira took her questions online. She typed in everything she could think of: bad luck after moving house, shoes and energy, placing shoes near doors, feng shui shoe placement. and the results stunned her. From ancient Eastern traditions to modern spiritual practices, many sources warned against keeping shoes at the main entrance. Some said shoes absorb negative energy from outside. Others believed they block the flow of abundance and luck. Certain spiritual teachings describe the doorway as a sacred passage, a place where energy enters and exits freely. By leaving shoes there, especially dirty or worn ones, you unintentionally block that energy. She stumbled across stories eerily similar to hers. People from different cultures, different corners of the world, all sharing accounts of strange misfortunes, health problems, and financial losses after carelessly storing shoes near the front door. It wasn't just folklore, it was a recurring pattern. But something about Mira's case was different. The more she read, the more she realized this wasn't just a spiritual blockage. There was something deeper, something darker at play in this house. When she returned from a quick trip to the local store that evening, she found her shoes. Not where she had left them, but placed in a perfect line across the entryway. She lived alone. No one had a key, and the door had been locked. She stood there frozen, the plastic bag nearly slipping from her hand. That chill returned, creeping up her spine like a slow warning. Something in this house knew she was digging. Something didn't want her to. And what she would uncover next might be the very reason why so many before her vanished without a trace. Mira didn't even step inside at first. She just stood there at the doorway, staring at her own shoes. 3 pairs, placed in a perfect line like someone had arranged them with care. But it wasn't neat in a comforting way. It felt calculated, intentional. Her mind raced for explanations. Maybe she forgot she'd moved them. Maybe she was tired. But deep down, she knew. She hadn't done this. Something else had. That night, the dreams returned, only this time they were clearer. She saw herself walking barefoot through a narrow corridor with old wooden floors, just like in her home. A whisper followed her, low, rhythmic, impossible to understand. But it filled her with dread. When she woke up, her feet were covered in dust. She hadn't left the bed. Desperate for answers, she returned to Mrs. D'Souza. The older woman hesitated this time, her eyes darting around before she let Mira into her living room. "It's not just about where the shoes are," she whispered. "It's about what they carry. Every step you take outside, that energy comes home with you. When you leave those shoes at the entrance, it doesn't stay on the leather, it spreads. Some houses, they hold onto that energy like a sponge." Mira pressed her. "Why this house? What happened here?" Mrs. D'Souza looked down. Years ago, a family lived there. They were struggling, always just barely getting by. The father, a builder, brought home something from one of his sites, something buried. After that, they couldn't catch a break. They said the floor near the door would creak on its own. Things moved. They blamed bad luck. But it was more than that. They left in silence, and no one saw them again. Mira felt the weight of those words, and suddenly her home didn't feel like hers anymore. Mira left Mrs. D'Souza's house shaken. Her mind buzzed with questions, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about shoes, it was about something much older, something tied to the house itself. That night she couldn't bring herself to leave her shoes by the door. She placed them inside a cupboard across the room and shut it tight. Then she walked back to the entryway and just stood there, staring at the floor. She had cleaned that spot before, scrubbed it. But now, under the soft yellow light, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A faint, circular marking etched into the floorboards. Not visible at a glance, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. It was just beneath where her shoes used to sit. The air around, hands trembling, she pried the floorboard up. Beneath it, wrapped in what looked like rotting cloth, was a small, rusted metal box. She didn't open it right away. Something about it felt wrong, like it had been waiting. When she finally lifted the lid, the air seemed to shift again. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, worn at the edges. It was the family who lived there before, the man, the woman, and a child. But behind them stood a shadowy figure, faint, almost invisible unless you looked closely, and someone had scribbled a message on the back. It never left. It just waits. Mira's stomach turned. She felt like she had just uncovered something she wasn't meant to find. As she sat in silence, trying to piece everything together, her vision blurred for a moment. The lights flickered. Then, from the far end of the hallway, she heard a voice. Faint, familiar. A child's whisper. "Don't leave the shoes there." She spun around, but no one was there. She raced to the cupboard where she'd hidden the shoes earlier. The door was open, empty. All 3 pairs were back by the mark on the floor. But there was something new now. Muddy footprints leading from the entryway to the hallway. Small ones, like a child had been walking around barefoot in the middle of the night. That was when she noticed her old journal sitting open on the coffee table. She hadn't written in it for weeks. But on the fresh page, in handwriting that wasn't hers, were 6 chilling words. "You brought it back with you." Now it wasn't just about shoes. It wasn't just about energy. Something had followed her. Something that had been dormant until now. Mira's hands trembled as she backed away from the journal. The air in the house had turned thick, like every breath carried weight. She could feel it now, not just hear or sense it. A presence, close, watching. The muddy footprints led to the hallway, then vanished near her bedroom door. Her instincts screamed to run, to leave everything behind. But something told her that if she left now, it wouldn't end. It would follow. It already had. She grabbed the box, the photo still inside, and returned to the strange symbol on the floor. The lines seemed to pulse faintly, like they were alive. Mira didn't know what she was doing, but something about the photo, the figure in the background, connected everything. She tore it in half, separating the shadow from the family. Instantly, a loud crack rang through the room. The floor vibrated, the lights blew out, and in the darkness the whisper returned, clearer now and angry. "You let me in." Panicked but focused, Mira dropped the torn piece with the shadow into the box, shut the lid, and shoved it back beneath the floor. The air hissed, and for a moment everything fell silent. The heaviness lifted, as if the house exhaled for the first time in years. Even the light outside the windows seemed brighter. She checked the entryway. The shoes were gone. The floor was smooth, no more footprints, no more whispers, just quiet. But just as she allowed herself to believe it was over, her phone buzzed to life again. One notification, a photo, no sender. It was a picture of her front door, from inside the house, and in the lower corner, barely visible but unmistakable, was the same shadowy figure, standing, waiting. Mira froze. Her heart dropped. She hadn't taken that photo, she hadn't been holding her phone. And suddenly, she understood. The ritual had sealed the box, but not the spirit. Whatever it was, it hadn't come from the house. It had attached to her long before she ever moved in. Somewhere, sometime in her past, it had chosen her. The shoes, the house, they were only the doorway. The real problem was never where she left her shoes. The real problem was what had been walking in them all along. Mira didn't sleep that night. She sat on her living room floor, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the door. Every creak, every shift in the shadows made her flinch. But nothing happened. The house stayed quiet, still. Morning came slowly, light creeping through the windows like a silent promise that maybe, just maybe, the worst had passed. But Mira knew better now. Some things don't leave just because the sun rises. She spent the next day going through her belongings, old bags, boxes from her previous apartment, clothes she hadn't worn in years. She looked at everything differently now. The idea that energy attaches itself to what we carry, what we wear, even where we place our shoes. It all made sense in a way it hadn't before. She remembered the bad luck she'd faced over the years, the sudden job losses, the broken friendships, the strange illnesses with no explanation. It was always brushed off as stress or timing, but now it seemed like a pattern, a trail. She decided to get rid of every pair of shoes she owned. Not out of fear, but out of intention. She donated them all, cleansed the floors with salt water, burned sage, and invited a local priest to bless the house. Not just for tradition, but to reclaim her space. She began keeping her entryway clear, open. She even changed the direction her bed faced, rearranged the furniture, and added houseplants to invite fresh energy. But the biggest change was inside her. She moved differently now, more aware, more grounded. She started learning about spiritual hygiene, energy protection, and the power of mindful placement. How small habits like leaving shoes near the door can affect the entire mood of a home. She didn't become superstitious. She became conscious. And though the strange photos never came again and no shadow appeared after that night, she still paused sometimes, especially near doorways, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because now she knew that what we bring into our homes matters, and that something as simple as where we leave our shoes can open doors we never meant to unlock. So if you've ever wondered why life suddenly feels heavier, luck seems to vanish, or your energy feels off, look down. Look where you leave your shoes. Sometimes the answer is right at your feet.